The vast chamber of the Unity Point space station was a sight to behold. Massive windows stretched across the walls, offering a breathtaking view of the endless dark of space, dotted with countless twinkling stars. The chamber was quiet, except for the low hum of the station's systems keeping everything in balance. Ambassador James Walker stood tall at the center of the room, his gray suit simple yet professional, in sharp contrast to the colorful robes of the alien representatives surrounding him. His eyes scanned the room, making brief eye contact with each representative, trying to read their faces. They looked back at him with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and a hint of discomfort. He had been in this chamber many times before, but today felt different. Today, he wasn't just there to negotiate. He was there to make a stand. "We will not accept these terms," Walker said quietly. His voice echoed across the room, cutting through the hushed murmurs of the council. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The alien representatives shifted in their seats, uneasy at the calmness in his tone. They were used to humans being submissive, following orders, but this time it was clear that Ambassador Walker had no intention of yielding. The council head, Representative Smith, a tall being with smooth blue skin and piercing eyes, leaned forward from his elevated seat at the front of the room. His fingers twitched slightly as he placed them on the surface of the podium in front of him. "Ambassador Walker, surely you understand our concerns. Humanity's rate of advancement is unprecedented." His voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was a firmness to it that suggested he wasn't used to being contradicted. The council must ensure stability. Walker straightened his back, meeting Smith's eyes without flinching. The silence in the room grew heavier, the kind of silence where every word seemed to carry the weight of an entire galaxy. Around him, 12 alien species watched him closely, some with large, unblinking black eyes, others with compound eyes that shimmered in the light. Some beings had skin that glowed faintly, while others remained a deep, dark hue. The variety of life was staggering, and yet, despite the differences, they all shared one thing: power. For 3 long years, Walker had sat at this table, trying to make them understand humanity's worth, to show them that they weren't just another race to be ignored. And yet, year after year, the council had rejected humanity's contributions, brushed them aside as insignificant. 3 years ago, Walker began, breaking the silence, his voice steady, but with a touch of frustration. "We came to you with proof that the drift, the dead zone at the edge of our galaxy, was expanding. We showed you the data. We explained how to stop it. You ignored us." A ripple of muttering spread across the room as the representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. The drift was a sensitive subject. It had already consumed entire star systems, and now it was growing faster than anyone had expected. But the council had refused to listen. They had their reasons, always claiming that humanity wasn't ready, that their technology wasn't trustworthy. 2 years ago, Walker continued, his voice unwavering, "We offered to share our gravity manipulation technology with every species in this room. A technology that could save entire planets from natural disasters, that could stop catastrophes like the one we saw on Proxima Beta last month. And yet, you refused it." Some of the representatives lowered their eyes, guilty looks passing between them. They knew Walker was right. The mining disaster on Proxima Beta had killed thousands. It could have been prevented, but the council had rejected the offer, fearing that giving such power to humanity would shift the balance of power in the galaxy. That technology, Walker pressed on, could have saved those lives. But you rejected it. A few representatives shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. 1 year ago, Walker continued, his voice gaining strength, "We warned you about the star in Sector 7. It was showing signs of instability. We even sent our best scientists to study it, to help prevent an explosion. But once again, you dismissed our warnings. And 3 months ago, that star went supernova." The room fell silent. The news of the star's destruction had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. 2 colonies had been lost in an instant. The council had allowed it to happen. Walker paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. He could feel the eyes of the representatives on him, some avoiding his gaze, others watching with growing concern. They knew he was right, but none of them wanted to admit it. Now, Walker's voice grew firmer. You demand that we limit our research. You want us to slow down our expansion. You want us to share everything we've learned, but only if we follow your restrictions. You want us to give up our independence, to be subjects to your council. The room seemed to tense even more. Several representatives leaned forward, their faces hardening. Walker had crossed a line. The council was not used to being challenged, especially by a human. Representative Smith raised a hand, signaling for calm. Ambassador, please understand. The council has maintained peace for 3,000 years by carefully managing technological advancement. Your species, humanity, has achieved in 2 centuries what others took millennia to develop. It is unnatural. It is destabilizing. Walker smiled, but there was no humor in it. He reached into his pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a small metal disc, his council membership badge. The simple action caused several security drones to shift nervously above him, their sensors locked onto his every movement. Walker knew the risk he was taking. He held up the badge for all to see. What creates instability, Walker said, his voice steady and filled with conviction, is the fear of progress. What causes suffering is the suppression of solutions. What kills people is the arrogance of assuming that slow means wise. The chamber fell silent. Even the usual hum of the station's environmental systems seemed to stop for a moment. Walker could hear the pounding of his own heart in the stillness. His words hung in the air, unspoken yet clear. Humanity would not be suppressed. Walker stepped back from the podium, his eyes never leaving Smith's. Humanity reached for the stars because we dreamed of a better future. We developed our technology to solve problems, not to gather power. We offered to share everything we learned. We asked only for the freedom to keep learning. He let the words settle, the tension in the room nearly unbearable. But you don't want partners, Walker thought. You want subjects. Representative Smith's eyes widened, and for the first time in their entire conversation, he seemed taken aback. He stood up quickly, his voice shaking with disbelief. Ambassador Walker, this is most irregular. Perhaps we should take a recess. Walker didn't even glance at him. We're done here, he said simply, his voice cold. He turned on his heel and began walking toward the massive doors behind him, his staff waiting just outside. The doors began to open automatically as he approached. The alien representatives erupted in protest, their voices rising in alarm. Ambassador, you can't just. This is unprecedented. The protocols clearly state, but Walker didn't look back. He knew what he had to do. Today, humanity had made its stand. As the doors closed behind him, the council chamber was left in stunned silence. The future had just shifted, and no one knew where it would lead. Ambassador James Walker walked swiftly down the narrow hallway, his footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor. Behind him, the massive doors of the council chamber slowly shut, sealing the heavy silence within. His staff, a small group of humans who had been watching the tense meeting from the outside, looked at him with a mix of surprise and uncertainty. No one had expected him to walk out. No one had expected him to stand his ground so firmly against the council. As he passed them, Walker didn't pause or even look at them. His mind was already racing, planning, considering the next steps. The bold move he had just made might have been the right one, but it was also dangerous. The council didn't like being challenged. If anything, they'd see his actions as an act of defiance, a threat to the peace they had carefully maintained for thousands of years. Ambassador. A voice broke through his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Sarah Cole, one of his trusted officers. She looked worried, but tried to hide it behind her calm demeanor. Are you okay? Walker stopped and turned to face her. He could see the concern in her eyes, but he had no time for reassurances. They had to move quickly now. We need to get back to the ship. he said in a low voice, urgency in his tone. "We've made our statement, but now we need to prepare for what comes next." Sarah nodded, not needing further explanation. She knew how dangerous it could be to challenge the Council, but she also knew that Walker was right. Humanity could no longer sit quietly while the galaxy ignored their warnings and their technology. As they made their way toward the docking bay, Walker's thoughts were already shifting. There was no turning back now. The Council would respond. They would either try to push humanity down further or, in their arrogance, they might think they could simply ignore them. But Walker knew better. Humanity had become a force in the galaxy, one that couldn't be silenced. The ship they were headed to was the Phoenix, a state-of-the-art vessel equipped with humanity's latest technology. Technology that the Council had rejected and feared. It was the perfect symbol of everything they had offered to share with the galaxy, but had been denied. And now, the Phoenix was more than just a ship. It was a beacon of defiance. When they reached the docking bay, Walker felt the weight of the decision settle on him. His fingers brushed against the cold metal of the ship's hull as he boarded. The Phoenix had been built for exploration, for peace, but now its purpose was something much larger. "Status report," he called out as he entered the command center. Commander David Hayes, a seasoned officer, looked up from the console. "All systems are online, Ambassador. We're ready for immediate departure." Hayes hesitated before continuing. "You know they're not going to take this lightly. The Council will be furious. We've just made enemies of some of the most powerful forces in the galaxy." Walker met his gaze, his expression unreadable. "I'm aware," he said calmly, "but this is the only way forward. We've spent too long trying to play by their rules, trying to make them see reason. It's time they saw what humanity is capable of." As Walker settled into the command chair, a sense of determination washed over him. This was no longer just about diplomacy. It was about survival. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long. Now it was time to show them the true power of Earth and its people. "Prepare for departure," Walker ordered. "Set course for Earth. We'll regroup and strategize. The Council might not listen, but the galaxy will, and we'll make sure they know we're not going to be held back anymore." The crew moved swiftly to comply, and within moments, the Phoenix was lifting off from Unity Point, heading back to Earth. As the station grew smaller in the distance, Walker couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. The first step had been taken, but what came next would be far more dangerous. Back on the station, in the Council chamber, the alien representatives were already in chaos. They were used to getting their way, used to maintaining control over the galaxy's power players. And now, one human had walked out on them. He had defied their authority. It was unthinkable. Representative Smith, his usually composed demeanor shattered, slammed his hand onto the podium. "We cannot let this stand. He has disrespected the Council, the very foundation of our peace." "But Ambassador Walker is right," a voice spoke up, though quietly, from one of the other representatives. It was a member of the Zephyri, a species that had always been neutral in galactic politics. "We cannot continue to ignore the warnings they've given us. The drift, the supernova. We should have acted sooner." "That's enough," Smith snapped, silencing the murmurs. "We have no time for this. We must act immediately." His voice grew cold, full of authority. "Prepare the fleets. Humanity has crossed the line. If they want war, we will give them one." Back on the Phoenix, Walker stood at the viewport, looking out at the stars. The ship was moving faster now, and Earth was only a few days away. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity had made its mark on the galaxy. And no matter what happened next, there was no going back. "This is only the beginning," Walker whispered to himself. He knew the Council would retaliate, but humanity had a power they hadn't seen yet, one they couldn't even begin to understand. And Walker was determined to make sure the galaxy knew that. In the vastness of space, a new chapter for humanity was about to begin. The Phoenix sailed through the cold expanse of space, its engines humming softly as it raced toward Earth. Inside the command center, the atmosphere was tense but focused. Commander David Hayes sat at his station, his fingers dancing across the controls, ensuring the ship was on course. The rest of the crew moved in coordinated silence, each one acutely aware of the dangerous road they had just started down. Ambassador James Walker stood at the viewport, gazing at the distant stars. His mind raced, considering the many possibilities that lay ahead. He knew the Council wouldn't let his defiance go unpunished. They were a powerful group of species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They had grown comfortable in their power, manipulating the flow of information, the distribution of resources, and the pace of technology. Humanity, with its rapid advancements, was a threat to their carefully constructed order. And now, Walker had given them a reason to strike back. "We need to be ready," Walker spoke, his voice calm but filled with urgency. He turned to face his crew, who were all gathered in the command center. "The Council will not let this go. They'll come after us with everything they have." Hayes nodded, his expression serious. "We've prepared for this possibility. Our defenses are in place, but we need to stay one step ahead. The Council is already a threat, but their fleets are formidable. If they act on their rage, we'll need to be ready to fight back." "I agree," Walker said, his mind running through every scenario. "But we can't just defend. We need to show the galaxy that humanity is no longer just a passive player in the Council's games. We need to hit back hard and fast before they can organize their retaliation." The crew exchanged glances, feeling the weight of the decision that had been made. For years, humanity had held back, hoping to find peaceful solutions, but that era was over. The Council had made it clear that they wouldn't allow humanity to reach its full potential. Now there would be consequences for their actions. Back on Unity Point, the Council had already begun to react. The representative from the Xantari, a reptilian species known for their strategic minds, was the first to speak after Walker's departure. "This cannot stand," the Xantari representative growled. "We cannot let one human walk out of the chamber without consequences. The very idea that humanity would challenge our authority is an affront to everything we've worked for." Representative Smith, still visibly shaken from the earlier confrontation, nodded in agreement. "Prepare the fleets. We need to remind humanity of their place. The Council has tolerated their rapid growth for far too long. They will learn that no one challenges us and gets away with it." In the Council's war rooms, commanders from each species began to make their preparations. The fleets of the galactic powers, large and small, began to mobilize. A sense of impending war hung in the air, and whispers of the Council's decision to retaliate spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The threat was now real. Back on the Phoenix, the crew had gathered in the strategy room. Walker and Hayes were at the head of the table, and the rest of the crew was ready for the next phase. Tension filled the air as they looked at the star charts and strategic maps spread out before them. "We know the Council is going to strike," Walker began, his voice steady despite the looming threat. "But we need to make sure they don't catch us off guard. We'll have to move quickly, and we'll need all hands on deck to execute our plan." The crew nodded in agreement. The reality of the situation was settling in. This wasn't just about defense anymore. The Phoenix wasn't built to fight a war, but it had one advantage: humanity's hidden weapon. The Council might have underestimated the Phoenix's capabilities, but they would soon learn just how powerful humanity's technology truly was. "We've got a problem," Lieutenant Cole spoke up, her voice tense as she pointed to the star charts. "The Council is already mobilizing its fleets. They've got ships en route to Earth, and they'll arrive in less than a week." Walker's eyes narrowed. "We can't let them reach Earth. If they strike before we have time to prepare, we'll be at their mercy. We need to disrupt their fleet before they can launch their attack." "What's the plan, Ambassador?" Hayes asked. Walker stood up, his gaze sweeping over the map. He took a deep breath before speaking. "We're going to hit them where it hurts. The Council relies heavily on their communication networks to coordinate their fleets. If we can sever those connections, we'll cripple their ability to act quickly. We'll send a strike force to take out their relay stations and disrupt their operations. It's a bold move, but it's our best shot." The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but there was no time to hesitate. Walker was right. The longer they waited, the more dangerous the situation would become. "Get the crew ready," Hayes ordered, his voice firm. "Prepare for a strike against the Council's relay stations. We'll leave in 2 hours." As the crew rushed to prepare, Walker stood at the viewport again, his thoughts heavy. He knew this would be their first true test. If they succeeded, they would have a chance to strike back against the Council and gain the upper hand. But failure would mean war. War on Earth. War for the survival of humanity. "This is just the beginning," Walker muttered to himself. "They think they can control us. They think they can crush us. We'll show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." In the distance, a faint flicker of light from the edge of the galaxy caught his eye. The Council's fleets were already mobilizing. The storm was coming, and humanity would be ready. The Phoenix cut through the stars, its engines firing with precision as it made its way toward the first of the Council's relay stations. Commander Hayes stood at the helm, his fingers tight around the controls, his eyes locked onto the data flowing across his screen. The crew worked quickly, but their nerves were taut. This mission wasn't just about disabling a relay. It was a declaration of war. And they knew that if they failed, there would be no turning back. Ambassador Walker stood beside him, looking out over the vast emptiness of space. The Council's fleets were still far off, but he knew they wouldn't stay that way for long. If they succeeded in taking out the relay stations, it would buy them precious time to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Time to make sure that humanity's message was heard across the galaxy, that they would not be oppressed any longer. "The station is just ahead," Lieutenant Cole said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "We're closing in on it now." Walker nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Remember, we disable the station, but we don't destroy it. The Council can't know we've already found a way to bypass their defenses." The crew worked with smooth efficiency. It was clear that the time spent preparing for this moment had paid off. Each of them knew their role and moved with the kind of certainty that comes with high-stakes situations. But even with the plan set, the weight of what they were about to do pressed heavily on their minds. "We're in range," Hayes called out. He turned to the crew. "Prepare the disruption charges. On my mark, we'll hit the station's main power grid. That will sever their communications, rendering them blind for a while." Walker stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We're not just doing this to weaken them. We're sending a message. The galaxy will know that humanity is no longer the weak, defenseless species they thought we were. We're taking control of our future." Hayes gave a short nod, and the crew activated the disruption charges. A moment of silence passed, the tension palpable. Then, with a sudden jolt, the ship rocked as the charges released. The Phoenix shuddered, the vibrations sending a ripple through the air. "The power grid is down," Lieutenant Cole confirmed, her voice steady. "Their communication systems are offline." Walker felt a brief surge of relief, but it was fleeting. They had succeeded, but they were far from safe. The clock was ticking, and the Council would soon realize what had happened. They would be coming for them. Fast. "Status report," Hayes demanded, his voice sharp. Cole tapped away at her console. "We're receiving encrypted transmissions. The Council is mobilizing their forces. They're aware of the disruption, but they don't yet know the source." "How long do we have?" Walker asked, his voice edged with urgency. Cole's fingers moved quickly over the controls, her brow furrowing as she analyzed the data. "They've already launched search parties. We've got maybe a few hours before they figure out where we are. After that, we'll be their primary target." Walker's jaw clenched. They had no time to waste. "Prepare to move to the next station," he ordered. "We hit them again, and we hit them fast." "Yes, sir," Cole responded immediately, her voice full of determination. The Phoenix adjusted course, and the crew quickly shifted into action. There was no room for mistakes now. Walker watched the crew move with precision, their every action coordinated and focused. He knew that the battle was just beginning. The Council would not let this go lightly, and soon they would have to face the full might of the galaxy's most powerful fleets. As the Phoenix sped through the void, Walker's mind raced. Each victory, each relay station they took down, would push the Council closer to war. But it was a war humanity had to fight. The future of Earth depended on it. Back in the Council's war rooms, the reactions were immediate. Representative Smith slammed his fist onto the table, his face contorted with anger. How dare they? How dare the humans think they can defy us like this? The Xantari representative, his reptilian eyes glowing with fury, hissed through his teeth. We must retaliate now, before they gain any more ground. We cannot allow this rebellion to go unanswered. We need more time, Smith insisted. Our fleets are still in the process of mobilizing. We can't let them gain a foothold. Send word to all Council members. Prepare for immediate counterattacks. We'll take back control before they can spread their message further. But it was too late. The Phoenix had already completed its second strike, disabling another relay station at the heart of Council space. The station flickered and died, its communications network silenced. Second station down, Cole confirmed with a smile, though there was little joy in her voice. We're one step closer. Walker leaned back in his chair, his thoughts racing. Keep pushing. We need to show them that humanity is a force to be reckoned with. He had made his decision. They were no longer on the defensive. Now, humanity would be the one calling the shots. As the Phoenix made its way to the third relay station, Walker's resolve hardened. The Council had underestimated humanity before, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. The Phoenix would keep striking until the galaxy had no choice but to recognize humanity's power. They had started a war, and they would finish it on their terms. In the silence of space, the future of Earth hung in the balance. The Phoenix drifted through the stars, its crew silent but focused. The third relay station was just ahead, nestled within a ring of asteroids. The Phoenix's crew knew the stakes were higher now. With 2 stations down, the Council would be frantic, mobilizing everything they had to hunt down the humans. The entire galaxy would be watching, waiting to see how far humanity was willing to go. Ambassador Walker stood by the viewport, his expression grim. His thoughts were far from the view of the stars. Each strike was a step toward something far bigger, something more dangerous. They weren't just fighting for Earth anymore. They were fighting for a place among the stars, a future where humanity could shape its own destiny. We're almost in range, Lieutenant Cole said from behind him. Her voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of tension. One more relay station, and we'll have severed their communication network. Walker turned from the viewport and faced her, his gaze unwavering. Once we hit this one, there's no going back. Are we ready? Cole nodded. Yes, sir. The crew's been working nonstop, but we got the tools we need to take down their systems. We'll disable it in seconds. Walker gave a curt nod and walked toward the command center. He stopped briefly, his eyes scanning the faces of his crew, each one resolute and ready. They were about to make history, and there would be no turning back. Prepare for the strike, he ordered. The crew began working with practiced precision. The Phoenix adjusted its course, the ship's engines humming steadily as they approached the station. The plan was simple: disable the station's communication systems, then vanish into the darkness of space before the Council could retaliate. It was a dance of precision, and every move counted. As they neared the station, Walker felt a sharp pang of unease in his chest. The Council was not a foe to be underestimated. Even with 3 relay stations down, there was still a vast network of fleets and forces loyal to the Council. They would fight back with everything they had. The Phoenix was strong, but it was still just one ship against an entire galaxy. We're in position, Cole said, breaking his thoughts, ready to deploy the disruptors. Walker glanced over at the screen. The station loomed ahead, its intricate structure covered in a maze of antennas and satellite dishes, communication lifelines for the Council. Every line of transmission was vital to their control of the galaxy. Taking it down would be a decisive blow, but it would also set off alarms. The Phoenix would be in the spotlight, and the Council would do whatever it took to hunt them down. "Deploy disruptors now," Walker commanded. A sharp jolt rocked the ship as the disruptor charges fired, sending a pulse of energy toward the station. The strike hit its target dead center, a wave of light flashing across the dark void as the station's communication systems went silent. A moment of eerie quiet followed, and then the station's lights flickered out, the lifeline to the galaxy cut off. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Cole confirmed, her voice steady but with a hint of pride. "The station's down." Walker's eyes narrowed. It was a victory, but it was short-lived. The Council's response would come swiftly. They knew what was at stake. The Phoenix was already preparing to move, but a nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. Suddenly, the quiet hum of the ship's systems was interrupted by an urgent alert. "Incoming vessels," Cole shouted, her fingers flying over her console. Walker's heart skipped a beat. "How many?" "5 Council ships, at least," Cole replied, her voice tight. "And they're closing in fast." "Damn it," Walker muttered. "We need to move, now." The Phoenix powered its engines, pushing the ship to its limits as they made a sharp turn toward the asteroid field. The Council ships would have the advantage in open space, but the asteroids would provide cover. If they could get into the field, they could lose the Council ships and make their escape. "Brace for impact," Walker shouted as the first Council ship fired. The ship shuddered as the Phoenix veered sharply, narrowly avoiding the blast. The asteroid field loomed ahead, but the Council ships were relentless, their weapons lighting up the space around them. The Phoenix ducked and weaved, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire as they entered the field of jagged rocks and debris. "We'd got to lose them in here," Hayes called from the helm. "Stay sharp. The asteroids will give us cover, but it won't last long." Walker gripped the armrest of his chair, his mind calculating the odds. The asteroid field was dense, but the Council ships were not inexperienced. They would adapt quickly, and soon the Phoenix would be out of options. "We can't outrun them," Walker muttered. "We need to outsmart them." He glanced at Cole, who was already pulling up a map of the asteroid field on her screen. "I've got an idea," she said, her voice low. "It's risky, but it might work." Walker didn't hesitate. "Do it." The crew worked swiftly, activating the ship's advanced cloaking technology. The Phoenix as outlined shimmered and blurred, becoming nearly invisible against the backdrop of asteroids. The Council ships fired again, their weapons missing as the Phoenix glided silently through the field. For a moment, it seemed like they had escaped, but then, "We've been spotted," Cole shouted, her eyes wide with shock. A pulse of energy shot out from the asteroid field, striking the Phoenix's hull. The ship groaned as the shields flickered. But they held. The cloaking system, however, had been compromised. They were no longer invisible. "We're out of time," Hayes said urgently. "They've locked onto us." Walker's heart raced. "Engage evasive maneuvers. Keep them guessing." As the battle raged on, the Phoenix's crew fought with every ounce of their strength. The Council ships closed in, but Walker knew that the game had changed. They were no longer the prey. They were the hunters. And the hunt was far from over. The Phoenix shook under the force of the Council ship's fire. Every second counted, and yet the battle seemed to stretch on forever. The crew was operating at their maximum capacity, their hearts pounding as the Phoenix darted through the asteroid field, narrowly evading the deadly shots from the pursuing fleet. The Council ships were relentless, their firepower powerful and precise. Every turn, every maneuver was a matter of life and death. Ambassador Walker stood at the front of the command center, watching the chaos unfold on the screens. The ship's shields were holding. Barely, but for how long? The Council's ships were far more advanced, and the longer they were in this field, the more chances they had to get hit. "How long until we can jump to hyperspace?" Walker demanded, his voice steady despite the mounting tension. "We need 5 more minutes," Cole replied, her fingers flying across the console. "We're not quite there yet." Walker could see the problem. Their current speed, though fast, wasn't fast enough to make a clean break. The Phoenix's engines were pushing their limits, but the Council ships were closing in. He needed a distraction, something to throw off their pursuers for just long enough to make the jump. "Can we make it to the debris field on the far side?" Walker asked. "It's a risk," Hayes replied, his voice tense, but his hand steady at the helm. "But it's our best shot." Walker didn't hesitate. "Do it. We'll take that risk." The Phoenix changed course sharply, diving deeper into the asteroid field. The ship shuddered violently as another blast struck their shields. The crew held on as the ship zigzagged through the massive rocks, narrowly avoiding certain death with each turn. "We're getting too close to the larger rocks," Cole called out. "We need to adjust our trajectory." "Hold on," Hayes shouted. "We're going to push through." For a moment, it seemed like the Phoenix might not make it. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and they would be crushed between the massive asteroids. But then, a bright idea flashed through Walker's mind. He wasn't just going to run away. The Phoenix had a secret weapon, a weapon the Council wasn't prepared for. It was a weapon that could turn the tide in their favor. "Prepare the decoy systems," Walker ordered. "You mean the mirror drones?" Cole asked, her voice tinged with confusion. "Yes," Walker confirmed, a fierce determination in his eyes. "It's our only shot." The crew worked swiftly to deploy the drones, small reflective devices that could create false readings on enemy sensors. The drones would scatter throughout the debris field, reflecting the light from the nearby stars and making it nearly impossible for the Council ships to track them. It was a desperate tactic, but it was their best chance. "Mirror drones launched," Cole said, her voice tight with concentration. "We've deployed enough to mask our signal." For a moment, the Phoenix seemed to vanish into the asteroid field, surrounded by dozens of small, shimmering reflections. The Council ships, unable to distinguish the real ship from the decoys, fired blindly, their shots scattering into empty space. "It's working," Hayes said with a relieved sigh. "We've lost them." But Walker knew they couldn't afford to get comfortable. The clock was ticking. They still had to make the jump to hyperspace. "Are we ready?" he asked, his eyes locked on Cole's console. "Just a few more seconds," she replied, her hands shaking from the tension. "Engines are almost primed." The Phoenix had to jump soon. The longer they waited, the higher the chances were that the Council ships would recover and track them down. The threat wasn't over yet. "Initiating jump sequence now," Cole said, her voice steady despite the nerves running through her. As the countdown began, the Phoenix's engines hummed louder, building energy for the jump. Walker could feel the vibrations of the ship under his feet, his heart racing in anticipation. This was it. If they didn't make the jump, they were done. "Engage," Walker shouted. With a sudden, blinding flash, the Phoenix shot forward, leaping into the safety of hyperspace. The stars around them stretched into long lines as the ship raced away from the danger that had been chasing them. They were safe, at least for now. The crew let out a collective breath, their exhaustion clear, but their relief even more so. They had survived, but the war was far from over. "We made it," Cole said, a smile creeping onto her face. Walker allowed himself a brief nod. "For now." He walked over to the viewport and stared into the swirling colors of hyperspace. The Council would be furious. They wouldn't let this go. But they had made a statement today. Humanity wasn't just a bystander in the galaxy anymore. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the Phoenix sailed deeper into the unknown, Walker knew one thing for sure. The fight for the future had only just begun. "Prepare for the next step," he said quietly, his gaze fixed ahead. We have a long road ahead. The Phoenix emerged from hyperspace, its engines humming as it slowly decelerated, preparing to make a strategic move. The crew had made it out of immediate danger, but they were far from safe. The Council would soon realize they'd been tricked, and they wouldn't rest until they hunted down the Phoenix and its crew. "We're in the Viren system," Cole reported, her voice steady, but her fingers still trembling from the stress of the previous hours. "Our next move is clear. We need to send a message to the Council." Ambassador Walker stood at the front of the command center, staring at the star system on the screen. The Viren system was a vast, barren place, perfect for a final stand. It had no significant resources or population, and it was far enough from the core of Council-controlled space that they could fight without interference. But they had to be careful. The Council would send reinforcements soon. "We're ready," Hayes said, his voice tinged with urgency. "The Phoenix can take on the Council ships if they come." Walker nodded but knew that the Phoenix was only a small part of the equation. The Council had the resources of dozens of worlds at their disposal. They would come in full force, and the crew of the Phoenix would need to outsmart them if they were to survive. "Let's prepare the message," Walker said, turning to Cole. "This is our chance to send the message we need." Cole set to work, accessing the ship's communication system. She was about to broadcast the message to the entire galaxy, and the stakes were higher than ever. Humanity's existence was now at risk. The Council had underestimated them before, and now, it was time to make them pay for their arrogance. "Message ready," Cole said. "Sending now." The message cut through the vast expanse of space, reaching the ears of the Council on distant worlds. It was simple, but powerful. "Humanity will no longer be ruled by fear. We will stand for our future, and we will fight for our right to exist. This is not just a warning. It is a declaration. The war for humanity's survival begins now." As soon as the message went live, a ripple of chaos spread across the galaxy. The Council ships, already stationed at the edges of the system, began to converge on the Phoenix. The response was swift. They hadn't been expecting this. The Council's fleet, numbering in the hundreds, sped toward the Viren system, their weapons primed and ready to strike. "Here they come," Hayes said, his voice tense as he turned the ship toward the incoming fleet. "They won't wait long to engage." Walker turned to face the crew, his eyes hard with determination. "We can't let them reach Earth. This battle is for our future. We stand or we fall." The Phoenix's engines roared to life as it powered forward, charging toward the Council's fleet. The crew was prepared, every man and woman ready for what was about to come. The final showdown was upon them, and there was no turning back. The first Council ship opened fire, its lasers streaking across the dark sky. The Phoenix responded immediately, dodging the blasts and returning fire with precision. The battle raged on, with the Phoenix darting through the clouds of debris left behind by the destroyed ships. The crew fought with everything they had, using every maneuver, every tactic, to outsmart and outgun their opponents. "We're taking heavy damage," Cole shouted, her voice strained as alarms blared throughout the ship. "Shields are failing." Walker gritted his teeth but didn't slow down. "Keep fighting. We need to hold them off long enough." The situation was dire. The Phoenix was outnumbered, but it was far from outclassed. Every shot, every turn was calculated. The crew was working as a single unified force, using everything they had to buy time. Time for the backup plan to come into play. "It's time," Walker muttered under his breath, barely audible above the chaos. He turned to Cole, who gave him a sharp nod. "Deploy the final decoy sequence," she said. "All drones, launch now." The Phoenix released dozens of decoy drones into the space surrounding it. The drones shimmered and created false readings on the Council sensors, further confusing their targeting systems. The battle became a blur of flashing lights as the Council ships continued to fire at the decoys while the Phoenix made its escape. But the Phoenix wasn't running anymore. It was preparing for its final strike. "All systems are online," Hayes called out. "We're ready to make the jump." Walker stepped forward, his expression grim but resolute. "This is the endgame. We make the jump, and we send the message to the galaxy. Humanity is ready for the future." With one final push, the Phoenix jumped into hyperspace, leaving the chaos of battle behind them. As the ship sped through the void, Walker looked back at the fading stars behind them. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. Humanity had made its stand, and the galaxy would never be the same again. "We've won this battle," Walker said quietly. "But the real fight is still ahead." And as the Phoenix sailed into the vast unknown, the crew knew they were ready. No matter what came next, they would face it together. They had ignited a spark, and now it was time to let it burn. The future of humanity had been secured, but only just. The galaxy had been warned, and there was no going back.